and they had secretaries who would type up the letters. The secretary at the end of the letter would put his or her initials at the bottom under the signature line. And I came back to Washington in 1992 and went to work for another lawyer, and we typed up our own letters. But the wife of the attorney there said I should make it look like I have a secretary and just make up some initials for her. So for the past almost 30 years, I've been sending out letters with the initials RBH at the bottom of the letter, and that my secretary is named Rather Be Hiking.
Rather Be Hiking. I love it. I love it. And
so I've sent out thousands of letters, and it's got that little inside joke at the bottom of every one of them.
Oh my gosh, that is so good to know. That is so funny and so witty. Yeah, I know. Rather be hiking. I know you'd rather be a full-time hiker and a part-time lawyer.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And do you also want to share with us, before we get into Q&A and camping and backpacking, how did Washington Hikers and Climbers come about?
Well, I call it my accidental baby. I never intended it to become what it has become, and nor did I ever think, even remotely think, that was possible. It's just sort of happenstance. But my mother had passed away about 4 days earlier, and I was on Facebook one night, and I suppose engaging in some sort of therapy, self-therapy. And I had been a member of 2 hiking groups on Facebook already. One, a international group called Hiking, and another one out of Croatia, of all places. And that's a separate story I won't bore you with, but I ended up on a Croatian hiking page. And that night I was just looking at the screen, and there was a little icon that said create group. And I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun to have a group for my friends where we could share hiking pictures. At that time, I was doing quite a bit of work on Twitter, and I had fallen into a community of outdoor adventurists on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And we met online every Friday morning for something called Hiker Chat.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, I thought, well, these other places have Facebook hiking pages. We should have one too. And so I called up one of my Twitter friends and said, in order to create a group page, I need to have at least one member. Will you be my first member? And so I clicked on the icon and invited my friend, and I just called it Washington Hikers, except my friend was a climber, so I changed it to Washington Hikers and Climbers. And that's the only genius I can take credit for, because I think it's such a simple name that if you type Washington Hiking into the search box,
yeah, it shows up.
It shows up. And yeah, I added about 9 or 10 of my Twitter friends to the page who all had some connection with Washington. Most of them didn't even live here anymore.
Oh, really?
And we left the group open, and you know, one day somebody joined who we didn't know, and that was the first inkling I had that this could be something different than just my friends and I clowning around on Facebook. So
what an amazing story. So it started as Washington Hiker and Climber.
Yeah.
As a therapy, yeah, and as inspiration from other groups and other social media, but therapy, and that's what it is to a lot of us, finding inspiration and getting outside, which is very therapeutic for a lot of us. So yeah, thank you. You did that.
Yeah, back then there were 2 other groups. that focused on hiking. One was northwesthikers.net.
Yeah.
They had a Facebook page, and they were pretty serious on that page. And then there was another Facebook page, and we all had like 200 or 300 members, and just kind of plodding along. And then, you know, our page just blew up one year. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it's amazing. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, and what a group it is, what a community, so many tips, so much inspiration for everyone. So I think with that little story, just a very short context of what we're trying to do today before we dive into Camping Backpacking 101. As a company, Adventure Tripper, we wanted to run international trips. After COVID, we started running local trips, but also started doing virtual events. Not only, we started with trying to familiarize people with international destinations while they couldn't travel, but as things started opening up back home, we tried to take initiative to educate people about how to recreate outdoors more safely. And now, as we talk to a lot of people while we run local trips, we realize a lot of people are still not very comfortable staying in hotels, cabins, lodges, thanks to COVID. And they feel it would be safer to just be camping somewhere or backpacking somewhere. But a lot of folks don't know where to start. A lot of folk here grew up doing hiking, camping, backpacking. They are comfortable, but at the same time, there's a lot of them who aren't, because they've never done it before and they don't know where to start. And it was to kind of empower and educate those people to be able to, you know, to introduce them to hiking, to camping and backpacking, so that even they have this opportunity to go outside and recreate in the wilderness. Because so many of the other recreation options during COVID now are not an option anymore. You can't go to cinemas, you can't travel internationally, and it is not easy being locked up at home inside, and it's not good for anybody. Trails are crowded. So the last session we did, the last webcast we did, was around how to find trails which are not as crowded, hidden gems, or how to go about, you know, finding those trails which are probably not as popular. Today we are attempting with Lee to try and give tips on how to get started with camping and backpacking. So that's what we're trying to do. And with that, I think we'll kick it off with the first question for Lee, which is, what is even the difference between camping and backpacking for somebody who's never done it before?
Well, I think that's a good starting point, because I do run into people who use the terms differently than I've used them, and I think a lot of my friends use them. When I think of camping, I think of what I call car camping. And I'll have friends who say, well, what do you mean? Do you sleep in your car? And that's not what I mean by car camping. Car camping is where you pack up all your gear in the back of your car, and you drive to a campground, and you set up your tent at the campground, and you have a stove and you cook your food, and it's an easy way to recreate outdoors, and that's what I consider camping or car camping. And backpacking is where you drive your car, but only to the trailhead.
Yes.
And then you put everything on your back.
Yes.
And you hike a hike. And at the end of the hike, rather than coming back to your car, you set up your tent in the outdoors or the wilderness, and you stay overnight in your tent in the backcountry.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much. And just listening to that difference of driving your car to a point where you want to be camping versus carrying everything makes me think how the gear for both those things needs to be so different, because when you're just driving your car to a spot where you want to be camping, you could be taking everything you need. But when you're backpacking, I mean, you need to be so conscious about what is it that you can carry on your back, what is all that you're going to need for how much ever time you're going to be spending there, a day, 2 days. So accordingly, you need to decide on what you want to carry. I think with that, it's a good place to start with probably gear. For somebody who's absolutely new to camping and backpacking, Lee, what are the things they should be thinking about in terms of gear when they are looking to go camping or backpacking? And as I said, it's going to be different.
Yes, although the names of the gear are pretty much the same for both. You have to have a tent, whether you're car camping or backpacking. You have to have a sleeping pad, whether
Yep.
you're car camping or backpacking. You have to have a sleeping bag, regardless of which you're doing. You have to have a stove
Yep.
to cook your food. At least most people want a stove, even if they're backpacking.
Mhm.
And yeah, a lot of the accessories are the same. You know, you need a light at night. You want a first aid kit.
Yeah.
You know, bring some duct tape in case you have to repair something on the fly.
Yeah.
So the main difference that you're looking at when you backpack is the weight.
Yeah.
You can, when you car camp, you can bring more comfortable gear. You can bring a heavier sleeping bag, a softer sleeping bag. You can bring a bigger pad. You can bring a Coleman stove instead of a little propane burner.
Yeah. I can bring the pillow I used to sleep on my bed, and I can bring my favorite pillow to sleep in my tent. I can't do that.
You can bring a real pillow car camping. I have an inflatable pillow that I've located recently that probably weighs less than an ounce.
Yeah.
And I'll take that when I go backpacking.
Yep.
I used to do a lot of car camping when my son was younger.
Yeah.
He wasn't a backpacker at an early age, so we would go out car camping. And I had all the car camping equipment then. I would have a big, heavy tent that slept 3 or 4 people, a mattress that inflated 6 inches thick. I had a double burner Coleman stove.
Yes.
And I still have all that stuff, but it's pretty much packed away in the basement. And when I do car camp nowadays, I just use my backpacking gear.
Very interesting. So 2 observations there. If somebody is thinking of starting with camping, but backpacking later on, then it might make sense to straight away invest in backpacking gear, because you can pretty much use that for camping as well. Might as well invest in like lightweight gear, which you can use for backpacking in future. So that's one, and correct me if I'm wrong. And the other observation, and this is again more a question that we received as we had people registering for this event, a question we received was, camping with kids or backpacking with kids, would it be accurate to say then if you are just getting started or you're getting started with kids, is it going to be safer to start with camping first before you start thinking of backpacking? Or do you think it's totally fine to even get started with backpacking? What's your view on that?
I think it's okay to start with backpacking if that's what you're interested in. My son's first overnight backpacking trip, he was probably 3 years old. So, you know, he didn't have to carry anything.
Yeah.
And I carried him part of the way.
Oh my gosh, I was going to ask you, were you carrying backpacking stuff and the kid? No way.
Well, yeah, but we picked short places, you know. I can remember backpacking at Sheep Lake, which is 2 miles off of Chinook Pass.
Right.
I'm
noting it down. I have a 4-year-old.
The first place they took him, I think, was up the Monte Cristo Road. We just walked, the road's closed. We walked a mile down the road to the Sauk River and pitched our tent at the side of the river and spent the night.
Perfect. Yeah, no, those are great ways to get started. No, thanks for that. So then
we would do more car camping back then.
Sure. Yes.
Lots of road trips to national parks, things like that.
Yeah, you're thinking about it because if you're totally new to it and you haven't been used to cooking and you know how to figure out food, it might be easier to get started camping first, probably where you can have a bigger stove, carry more food stuff, and as you get a hang of it, it's probably easier doing backpacking. Although, you know, not saying that you can't start with backpacking straight away. With that, I think that's a good segue into food. That's another big critical thing. Once you figured out where you're going to sleep, what gear you need for sleeping, and your shelter, the next thing is food. So what would you recommend for camping, which I'm assuming is going to be much easier versus then backpacking? What kind of foods should people be thinking? And again, I would imagine it's going to be different for a single day or a couple of days versus a longer trip. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, that does remind me of the one piece of gear that you will have for car camping that you will not have for backpacking, and that is a cooler,
Right.
in which you can keep your drinks and your food. And when we car camped, ate we ate very well. You know, salmon, potatoes, corn on the cob, uh, things like that.
Yeah.
And anything you can cook at home, you can cook car camping. When
Yeah.
you backpacking's a little more of a challenge because although if I'm going on just a single overnight trip, I will occasionally bring fresh food
Yeah.
if the hike's not too hard. But if it's a long hike or it's multi-day, the fresh food won't last that long. You can't bring something to preserve it that long. And so you start getting into the dehydrated meals
Right.
that they sell at all the outdoor recreation spots.
Right.
And they're getting better and better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't recommend cooking the dehydrated meals at home because they're not very good at home. But when you've hiked all day, they taste pretty good in the
Yes.
backcountry. And what I'm working on now is trying to create my own meals out of regular products that you can buy. For a while, I had a food dehydrator and I was dehydrating some of my food. I eventually gave that back to my sister, though. But you
Interesting.
can still, even without a dehydrator, come up with interesting meals. You can go out and buy a box of couscous, uh,
Mm-hmm.
chop up some nuts, chop up some dried apricots, put it all into a bag, uh, have a can of canned salmon or something like that that you bring
Yeah.
with you, and
Yeah.
you heat up the couscous and you throw the salmon on top, and you've got a good meal that doesn't have quite the same dehydrated meal aspect to it. So that's what I'm working on now, is just trying to be creative with things you can buy in the grocery store and take on your trips.
It's interesting to see the transition, how where you start and then you try to do your own dehydrated meals and now you're trying to figure out more creative options. But that's fancy stuff. The last camping trip I did, and our camping trip tend to be not as elaborate like camping, but only because we don't find the time to figure out all the food. So we still take backpacking style food, which is stuff like just Campbell's soup cans, which we can warm up in a jet boil. And like I said, I have a 4-year-old, so instant mac and cheese or ramen works just fine.
Those are good. Those are things that you can take backpacking.
Yeah, exactly. We use that for camping too, just because we can't figure out more elaborate food. But anyway, no, that's super helpful. So with food sorted, and I'm looking at the questions. A lot of questions we're getting are around how do you pick a spot? So whether it's camping, backpacking, I think it'll be good to know. People want tips on when you're on a trail, how do you find the right spot to pick? Or it would also be great to hear not just what factors go into picking the right spot, but also would be great if you could share some resources with people who are either new to it or are experienced but are wanting to look for the really nice spots. What are your tips for finding the right location?
Well, it's really got two parts to it. And the first part is figuring out where you're going to hike. And when I started out hiking, we had very few resources. We had the Mountaineers guidebooks written by Harvey Manning and Ira Spring.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty much all you had. And you would read those books cover to cover. You'd look at their pictures and they would talk about where the campsites were along the trail.
Yeah.
And you would say, okay, well, this is I'm going to choose this hike, and I'm going to try and hike 8 miles into the meadow they're talking about where they say there are a bunch of campsites. And
Right.
so you're answering that question. starts with doing your research before you head out. And
Definitely.
now there are so many places you can do your research. You can research on Washington Trails Association,
Yes.
WTA.org. That has always been my go-to site for.
Or campsites as well. I definitely use it for hiking, but I didn't know you could use it for campsites as well.
Well, it will talk about where there are campsites sometimes along the trail. But again, and WTA does mention at the top of each hike whether it's a backpacking hike, it can be done as a backpacking trip or not. They have a little tent icon,
Interesting.
and you know where you're going to find the campsites. If the hike is to a meadow,
Yeah.
let's say it's Spider Meadow,
Yeah.
and it's a 5-mile hike, and they say you can do camping there, you're going to find campsites at the meadow.
Sure.
And so you start getting a sense as to where they're going to be. They're not just sprinkled randomly around. They're all generally near water sources.
Yeah.
And so.
Oh, that's a good point. And water sources, because otherwise you would have to carry so much water, and that's going to be a lot of weight to carry on your back.
Yeah. So I use WTA a lot. You can use the Washington Hikers and Climbers
Yeah.
page to get a visual impression of what places are like.
Yeah.
There are lots of other pages on Facebook. There are things like All Trails and Gaia that you can get information on, and you can one thing I'll do quite a bit when I take a trip. I took a 4-day trip to Banff last winter,
Yeah.
and I was going to go snowshoeing there. I had no idea where to snowshoe, so I just Googled best snowshoes in Banff and got all sorts of articles about where you could snowshoe, and finally found one that really gave me the information I wanted, and I relied on that page for the entire trip. So
Fantastic.
all sorts of research you can do before you head out, and then once you head out, you do want to. The things you look for, number one, are an established campsite.
Right.
You don't want to camp on vegetation where people have not camped before, because that is a violation of leave no trace principles.
Great.
We can talk about leave no trace if you want, but you want to find an established campsite where people have camped before on bare dirt or rock or gravel or whatever, and you want to be near a water source so you can cook and clean and purify your own water for drinking, and you want to find a pretty place.
Yeah.
That's how I pick them.
That's number one. Absolutely. Find a pretty place. Noted. And I would imagine, I just see there's another great resource shared by Martina. Thanks for sharing, Martina. So she's saying hikingwithmybrother.com is another great resource. I'm totally checking it out. I haven't come across that one before. And I'm guessing. Yeah.
I followed those two on Twitter back in my Twitter days.
Is that right? Okay, cool. I'm definitely checking it out. So the other, thanks, Martina. Then I'm guessing for camping, it's probably going to be more straightforward, because you could probably just go to that particular national park or state park site and find out where the campsites are, the campgrounds are, right?
Yeah.
Straightforward. Got it. Okay, thank you.
In the national parks, that's pretty much all you can do is camp at their established sites.
Right,
I did see one question that popped up about animals.
Yes.
And
that's the next one. That's the next one on safety. We'll get to it.
Okay.
Because I am very keen to ask you another question on locations. So you've talked about which factors, resources. I actually have two more questions. One is, which are your favorite top 2 or 3 backpacking spots, and which are top 2 or 3 backpacking spots that you would recommend the beginners in our audience?
Well, picking a favorite hike in Washington is like choosing your favorite child.
Oh my gosh.
I can't really do that very well. I once created a list of what I thought were the 10 best day hikes in Washington, and that list is up to 25 now, uh, because they're all great, and
True.
one's as good as the other.
That's
My personal favorite places to go, I love Rampart Ridge above Rampart Lakes Basin near Snoqualmie Pass.
yeah.
I like Snowgrass Flat in the Goat Rocks.
Yeah.
Fantastic place to backpack.
Yeah.
I like the Mount Baker Railroad Grade. I see Kim Lamb is on here. She and I did that hike once, and
Right.
yeah. So I love Spider Meadow. That's a great place to backpack and not too difficult. I mean, it's 5 miles long, but the
Yep.
elevation gain is only 1,500 feet, and you just get into this
Yeah.
drop dead gorgeous meadow. So that'd be a good beginner's backpack. A lot of people go to Barkley Lake or
Yep.
Hyatt Lake. Those are flat 1 and 2 mile hikes. A lot of people do those with their kids their first time.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's super helpful. Thank you so much. I was just busy taking away notes for for your favorite places and beginner ones.
I have some others I'd mention. I mean, Lake Ingalls is a fantastic
Ooh,
hike, one of the top in the state. You can backpack there, but it's just going to be tremendously crowded this
yes,
summer, as
yes.
will with some of those others.
I think that's one of the big factors to consider this year is where it's probably not possible to avoid crowds totally. But yeah, that's going to be one of the factors too this year, I guess.
Another
So,
place people might look is the Chain Lakes Loop up around Mount Baker area. That's a good beginner's backpack
great.
location.
Thank you. Wow, so many. That's amazing to get started. That's a great list to get started with. So now with that, I think let's get to safety. There's so many questions. We received questions while people were registering for the event, but I see many questions about safety. So safety in general when you're backpacking, I guess much less so when you're camping, but also safety when you're in bear country. There's goats around. I remember one specific question we received in the registration forms was Eastern Washington. So I'm guessing they were talking about snakes, probably. So just safety generally while backpacking. What are your tips for people getting started, or what do you do personally?
Well, I'll start by talking about animals. And as far as animals go, I basically don't worry about animals. I know animals freak out a lot of people. I've run into probably 24 bear in the backcountry. They have all reacted one of two ways. And that is either by running away or with complete indifference. They've usually got their nose buried in a bush and they're eating the bush and they don't even look at you.
Right.
Now this applies to Washington only. We have a very tame species of bear here. They're vegetarians, basically. I know not of a single bear attack in the history of this state on a hiker. You take precautions. You don't sleep with food in your tent because the scent will attract the bears.
So what
So
do you do with your food?
I either hang the food in a tree using a bear rope,
Yeah.
or I bring a bear canister
Yeah.
and put the food in there. Some people have scent-proof bags that they use,
Mm-hmm.
which you're allowed to use in many places. And you want to store the food away from your tent because the bears will smell the food and get attracted to it if
Yeah.
it's left out in the open.
Yes.
So I'm always telling people, keep a clean camp. Don't leave your food unattended.
Yeah.
At night, hang it up.
And
You
it
have
works.
nothing.
I think that applies even when you're camping. Even when you're camping, I was camping in the North Cascades just this past weekend, and it was bear territory. We wouldn't leave anything near our campsites, everything back in the car. So you don't probably have to look for a tree to hang your food, but even if you're camping, just put it away. We just had like a tiny little cereal bar, which got chewed by like my son probably left like a small piece unfinished. We didn't realize, and some critter came in. There were bits of it all over. But even if you're camping, just probably put it away in the car. Make sure there's no food left in your backpacks or wherever.
The
Yeah.
only animal I've ever had trouble with are rodents.
Yes.
I've left dish rags out before and found them just destroyed the next morning.
They
Once
will
I was,
your
once,
tent. They will eat through your backpack to get to the food.
yeah, once I parked at the Hannigan Pass trailhead up near Mount Baker, and they snuck into my car and got into my trunk and ate food that was in my trunk.
That one I haven't heard of before. A rodent got into your car.
Now the one death that has occurred in the last 25 years to a hiker in Washington was a mountain goat incident in the Olympics,
Yes.
where an unfortunate hiker was gored by an aggressive goat. And it's ironic because everybody sees the goats and they think, oh, how cute, and they terrified of the bears, but it's actually the goats are more dangerous than the bears.
Aggressive.
To the hikers. Rattlesnakes, that is something you have to look out for in Eastern Washington, and as you have to also look out for ticks. But those are the things I worry about the most, are the ticks and the rattlesnakes in Eastern Washington. Partly because I'm not used to them. But the bears don't concern me at all. Keep a clean camp. When you're hiking, make a little noise. If you can't see too far ahead of you on the trail and you're in bear country, you won't have any problem with them.
Yeah, and I think for the goats, the advice I've always gotten when I wanted to hike in the enchantments or anywhere else is that they are attracted to when you want to urinate because they're looking for salt. So you want to be very careful, when you do that. But even otherwise, you want to keep your distance because they're known to charge every once in a while. So you want to keep your distance, and they're not
a little aggressive.
Yeah,
and that brings up a leave no trace issue. When you do pee in the outdoors in goat country, they ask you to pee on the rocks and not the vegetation, because the goats will come and eat the vegetation to get your pee, and so they'd rather you just pee on the rock where you can
lick it off the rock.
the goat can just lick it up without doing any damage. So
fair enough. No, that I'm sure a lot of people probably wouldn't have thought about that. And
I should mention one other animal, and that's the mountain lion. Mountain lion sightings are very rare. I've hiked for over 25 years. I've never seen a mountain lion.
Right.
But they are occasionally seen. They're nighttime predators. So, the one thing I don't do is hike at night by myself.
Yeah.
But there's protocol for what to do if you see a mountain lion. And it's kind of the exact opposite of what you do if you see a bear. If anyone's interested in knowing that, they can shoot me a message on Facebook or reach out through you, and I'm happy to answer that question.
That's sweet of you. Thanks, Lee. I know. Yeah, I mean, that's, I forgot to mention that during your introduction, because that's what I love the most about you. You are like a walking encyclopedia, but how approachable you are to anybody who's getting started or anybody who has a question about hiking trails. I mean, you're always so willing to share your knowledge and answer the questions, and really appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I enjoy it. Yeah, and anybody who's on here tonight is free to shoot me a Facebook friend request or send me a message, and I'll eventually find it and answer any questions you have.
Thank you. So while on safety, we talked about safety from animals, and I'm thinking just to close the loop on that, we talked about bear, goats, cougars, rattlesnakes. All that you can do is probably just be aware for the sound. Or is there anything more you can do?
None of these animals, other than the mountain lion, are predators. A rattlesnake will never attack to
Yeah.
be aggressive. It's always because
Defensive.
you startled it and it's reacting defensively.
Correct.
I did do a hike once where there were probably 50 rattlesnakes
Oh, I wouldn't sleep at night.
to the trail. It was the Cowiche Canyon outside of Ellensburg. And yeah, when you got close, they would rattle and then
Oh my gosh.
they would move off the trail. So none of these, are trying to eat you,
Yeah.
other than maybe the mountain lions. So
Yes. Yes.
my biggest safety concern hiking is injury. Um,
Fair enough.
that's where people get into trouble. They don't get into trouble because of animals. They get
Yes.
hurt in the backcountry and need to be rescued or can't get out. That's
Gear has to include the 10 essentials, including the first aid kit.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's great. And while on safety, Lee, what is very relevant today is safety from a COVID perspective. We talked a
Mhm.
little bit about crowding on trails. How do you stay safe, or what kind of protocol do you follow to do whatever best you can in terms of reducing your exposure to COVID as you hike, backpack, camp?
Well, the only way to reduce your exposure to COVID is to reduce your exposure to people. Uh, the So I've kind of taken it upon myself this year to not day hike so much, because that's where you run into the bigger crowds, are on the popular day hikes. So I am mostly backpacking this year and trying to get further away from the population centers and further down the trail where you will find less people.
Yeah.
I do have a buff that I wear around my neck, and when I'm in close contact with somebody passing them on the trail, I'll pull it up like a mask.
Yeah.
They don't offer you any protection. They're really to protect other people, unless you have a very high-tech mask. The masks are mostly to protect other people, not yourself. So it depends on what your comfort level is. The good news is that from everything I've read, it's very difficult to catch COVID outdoors from a quick passing of a single individual on the trail. If you're social distancing outside, and we do that, the people I hike with these days, we drive to the trailhead in separate cars.
Yeah.
We're more than 6 feet apart on the trail. We sleep in separate tents. We don't share food or gear generally. We don't stop at the bar on the way home from the hike.
Yeah.
If you follow those things, I think it's pretty hard to get this outdoors from just passing somebody on the trail.
I can imagine. And
But,
especially people are wearing the masks.
but on the other hand, there are little things you can do that don't take any effort at all. And we do them out of an abundance of caution. We slip up the mask or the face covering. We turn our heads so we're not breathing on somebody. We don't get right in their face and start talking to them.
Yeah.
And just use your common sense. But it does impact all aspects of this. I bring a glove in the car for when I pump gas at the gas station,
Yes.
and really try to avoid the crowded trails.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, no, all great points. Wearing a mask, trying to social distance on the trails, no carpooling, no sharing of food, just those little precautions. And very valid point that it's so much harder to catch COVID outdoors rather than indoors, sitting in a restaurant when you're breathing the same air.
We're better off being on the trail.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. No, fantastic. That's great. Yeah, I think that is again another something that is not directly or probably even related to the topic, camping, backpacking. We're talking about crowding on trails. I just want to touch upon that very briefly before we get on to Q&A, is there is just so much crowding on trails, which at least in my experience, I'm a fairly new hiker, started hiking only a few years ago. I haven't seen so many people on trails before. Like, even if it's the same trails that I've hiked before, this seems like a new phenomena. What do you think is happening? Why is there so much crowding? Do you think it's gonna be like this? Do you think it's gonna change? What are your thoughts on that?
I think we have kind of a perfect storm going on right now, which has led to the most terrible trail conditions I've seen in my life. A large part of it is fueled by the fact that a fifth of the population is out of work. And you mentioned earlier, they can't do other things. They can't go out to eat. They can't go to the movies. They can't go to the bowling alley. They can't hang out at a bar.
Yeah,
And people were cooped indoors and in their neighborhoods for the first month or two of this. And when they opened things up, it was just a mad rush to get outside. Uh,
yeah,
I do think social media plays a role in uh, what's going on. I'm not quite as down on it as some others are, but you know, I think social media is here to stay. The Washington Hikers and Climbers group could disappear tomorrow. There's a dozen other places people can post their pictures and see stuff.
there's Instagram as well. I mean, yeah,
Instagram, TikTok.
yeah,
Uh, you know, we haven't, just as an example, we have not allowed pictures from Kolchak Lake on Washington Hikers and Climbers for about 3 weeks now, and the place is still getting overrun. And
wow.
someone told me the other day that if you get on TikTok, it's nothing but Kolchak Lake pictures.
Amazing.
And, you know, so I don't think you can put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah.
Social media is here to stay. We might as well figure out how to turn it into a teaching tool and try and mitigate some of the damage that way. Um,
So social,
so, but
sorry.
social media can, you know, we see it on our page where somebody posts a picture of a hike and it's beautiful pictures, and the next week it's a mad rush for everybody to go do that hike.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
we're trying to promote less crowded hikes this year and not publicize the most crowded ones. And
yeah. I can imagine how much work goes into managing such a large community responsibly. The way you guys do it's, yeah, just hats off. I can imagine how much effort that is. But I think the bigger question is, social media is here to stay, but are the crowds, you think, gonna stay? I know it's not helping matters now that the trail maintenance staff is probably not back yet, and which is what is making matters worse. But I think the bigger question is, do you think the crowds are here to stay, or do you think it will kind of go down
I
when?
think it, I think it will go down somewhat.
Yeah,
But hiking was gaining popularity before COVID.
sure,
Uh,
fair
you
enough.
know, I'd heard reports about the Blanca Lake Trailhead where 3,000 people signed the trail registry in 2012, and
Yeah,
2016, 20,000 people signed the trail registry. So hiking has been gaining in popularity. I think just people find that it's a great way to release from the stress of society.
absolutely, no denying. Yep.
Yeah, so it's the trails were getting more crowded before COVID hit, but I think really that's been the kind of the icing on the cake, which is pushed
Yeah.
beyond the tipping point, is because people just don't have anything else to do. And
To be fair, it's been extremely stressful on so many different levels for so many people, not having jobs, or, just coping with maybe losing somebody to COVID, losing a loved one. People are stuck with, their kids while trying to manage work. So it can be extremely stressful for people, and it's a great way, a great release to be able to get out in the outdoors. Just hoping that, they have other avenues to recreate as well, and slowly things open up and it's not as bad anymore. So until then, I think we can just exercise precaution and try to be responsible in the way we recreate and try to preserve the trails where we are recreating. I think with that, thank you for answering all the questions, Lee. I got all my questions answered. Now you have all our audience's questions. I was trying to pick up questions as we were talking, but there's many more good questions here. So just a request to everyone, if you have any more questions, please keep typing in there and I'll start picking up questions from there now. So one of the questions I see here, Lee, is from Christina, who says, what is better, boiling the water or using the tabs? We talked about water. This is a great question. If you said it's good to identify backpacking spots near a water source. Is it safe to drink water from the water source? How do you kind of purify it? Purifier, boiling, tabs? What's your recommendation?
Yeah, you don't want to drink the water straight, in my opinion. I have a friend who drank straight out of the stream for 30 years. He only got sick once. He got sick for 30 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the streams have Giardia in them. And unfortunately, with a lot of human behavior, people are, I see it all the time. I'll see toilet paper next to the stream. So, somebody went to the bathroom there, and that stuff seeps through the ground and into the water. So you want to treat it somehow.
Yeah.
When I started hiking, we treated it with tablets, and then with iodine tablets. And those did give it a little strange taste, but it did purify the water. Then there were tablets to take away the iodine tablet taste. I eventually got into just boiling my water.
Sure.
If you put it in the pot on the stove, boil it for at least a minute, that's going to kill pretty much everything in it. The downside to that is you're using up fuel to boil your water. So I think more and more people are using filters these days. Some people have large filters and they'll filter liters of water at a time.
Yeah.
My preferred way these days, I have a Sawyer mini filter that can screw onto the top of a liter water bottle that you buy at the gas station.
Right.
And as long as you're going by streams and creeks, you can just take that mini filter off, fill up your water bottle, your empty water bottle that you got at the gas station, screw the mini filter back on, and just drink your water straight from there.
I think that's what's amazing about the increasing popularity of the outdoors is there's also so much innovation. I got the Sawyer filter, and guess what? In like 2 years, I came across another new cool thing, which is the bee-free collapsible bottles, right? They're so lightweight. It's much lighter than my Nalgene. I just take that bee-free collapsible bottle, fill water from a stream, and as you drink, it gets filtered. So there's just so many new products coming in, so much innovation. So yeah, it's all great. Thanks for that. I think that's super helpful. Another question we have from Cody here is it common to bring dogs while backpacking?
A lot of people bring dogs while backpacking. There are some trails where dogs are not allowed. Kolchak Lake, Lake Ingalls, they're not allowed in the national parks on the trails. You can bring them to the parking lot, but you can't go on the trails with them in the national parks.
Yeah.
But pretty much everywhere else, if your dog's comfortable with it, you can do it. I'm personally not a dog owner, so I'm not the best person to answer that question, but I know plenty of people who backpack with their dogs.
Got it. Yeah, sure. No, I think that definitely should help. Another question I see from Karan is, could you perhaps comment on toilet etiquette? I think this is all the more relevant now that toilets are closed. A lot of the facilities are not open yet because the staff is still not back. So
yeah, that's a great question, and we're really having a problem with toilet paper on the trail these days. First off, where do you go to the bathroom? You don't want to go near a water source. You want to be at least a couple 100 feet away from a water source. If you are peeing, just get yourself away from the water. If you're, for a man, it's easy, let's be honest. We don't need to wipe up afterwards. I know we had a very interesting thread on the Washington Hikers and Climbers page about this the other day. Some women were saying, "Hey, I just don't wipe up," you know, and other women were saying, "Oh, you got to be crazy, I got to wipe up." And other people use these devices, the sheepies and things like that, that allow you to stand up and as a woman and urinate. If you are going to generate any toilet paper, this is what I'm doing: is I'm bringing a plastic baggie on all my backcountry trips, and I'm
Pack it out. Yeah.
you,
A simple pouch is perfectly gonna keep all the smell, everything in it. So yeah, it's not that hard.
if you are going to defecate in the wilderness and you can't find a pit toilet, a lot of the campsites have pit toilets.
That's right.
But if you can't, you get away from the water source, you dig a hole 6 inches deep, you defecate into the hole, you cover it up, you wipe yourself up with toilet paper, and I bring out that plastic bag and I stick it in the plastic bag and seal it up. And if you got to seal it up twice to make it more palatable,
Yeah.
that's what you do.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of comfort as well. As you start, as you do more and you get more seasoned camper, backpacker, I think you get to just sort of relieving yourself in the wilderness. I know, because like I said, I'm myself fairly new. It was a journey. Initially, I would hesitate, and then I slowly learned, and I learned it the hard way. And this was when I was climbing. I tried to step away, like 100 feet away, to go pee, because you just can't go anywhere. So a toilet, a designated toilet, and I punctured through a crevasse, and I'm like. I would have just, no one would have ever found me. I was like, I'm just going to pee, just like guys, wherever. If I need to do it, I'll just go do it. It's better than dying. So it's a matter of gradually you get that comfort level. But I'd also like to share, there is, Lee, what we use for climbing is all the, there's the bags, the bag. So you can just poop. Yeah, so you can just order those bags on Amazon, and because when we're climbing mountains, whether it's Mount Rainier or Mount Baker, you can't even dig that hole and leave it there. You have to pack it out. So if you're camping for 3 days on a mountain, we pack it out. You do have poop bags, so just get some of those, and they keep everything in it. They have everything you need, and you just pack it all out because they're designed for it. So that's something you guys can look into as well. I think with that, another question. Oh, yes. Backpacking, camping in Washington. How do you stay dry on wet days, on days that it rains?
You don't. I carry a rain shell on all my backpacking trips. Yeah. To wear, but generally I pay attention to the weather, and if it's going to rain and I don't want to get wet, I don't go. Yeah. I'll give you a break there to get some more water, and I'll probably add my 2 cents to that. One tip that I've learned mountaineering is we line our backpacks with trash bags, right? And put everything inside the trash bag just to make sure when you're climbing or backpacking, your gear does not get wet. I mean, if your tent gets wet, you typically have a rain fly based on the forecast, based on the time of the year you're going, take your rain fly. It's going to add weight, but yeah, if you want to stay dry, have a tarp. But if your sleeping bag gets wet, it's not going to be fun. So I think lining the backpack is something that has worked for me. But yeah, once you've set up camp and then you're getting wet, it's a matter of what kind of gear you pick. Obviously, as you try to pick more rainproof jackets, Gore-Tex, or rainproof tents, it gets more expensive, but yeah. And most backpacks these days come with a backpack cover that you can slip over the pack when you. True. That is true. Yep. I'm just taking a look at the last few questions. Want to learn how to do more than day hikes, truly some of the good resources to look at. I think we covered a lot of that, what to pack, what to expect. We've covered a lot of ground today. Water filter. Oh, so a water filter will filter out the grit, but does it kill the bacteria?
I'm not qualified to answer that question.
It kills 99% of the bacteria.
Really? I didn't know that. Interesting.
That's how they're advertised anyway.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Interesting. Thank you. I didn't know that fact, or the way it's advertised. Another question I see that we haven't covered, Lee, is how should I react to the people who bring dogs on the trail that dog is not allowed? Well, I think this is more a personal, everybody would probably handle it differently. But I think it's good to hear your perspective.
My perspective is we don't even allow this discussion on Washington hikers and climbers because it goes bad so quickly that
Not surprised.
I'll tell you what I do. When I see a dog on a trail where he's not supposed to be, I go up to the person and I say, hey, and I look around like I'm telling them a secret. I'll say, don't let the ranger catch you because you'll get fined for having your dog on the trail. And so they think that you're trying to help them out, but what you're really doing is educating them that the dog isn't allowed there. I've done that a few times. My first instinct is to get really upset and yell at them. You know, you can't have that dog here. But what I do is I'll say, hey, I hope, you know, don't let the ranger catch you because you'll get a ticket for having them here. And so they think you're helping them out. And that's a way to get the information to them without them reacting negatively.
That's Lee the genius. Maybe it's you've probably inculcated that over the 7 years of diplomatically managing the Washington Hikers and Climbers group. But no, I think that's really clever. I think we've addressed most of the questions. One of the comments I see here is Martina said she's less worried about the difficulty of the hikes or the animals, but more concerned about the forest roads at times, you know, in terms of the condition of the road. And yeah. So that's
most roads in Washington are passable in every vehicle. I've had low clearance vehicles. I have 4-wheel drive, but they're not high clearance vehicles, and there's no place I haven't been able to get to, but some of them are pretty bad.
Yes, I had experience of that on the Mountain Loop Highway a few weekends ago. Lots of potholes. So something to look into as well as you select your site where you're driving in terms of which vehicle you have and would you really need. And I think the trail reports on WTA are super handy in terms of learning about the latest conditions. And I've seen comments on Washington Hikers and Climbers page as well. So yeah, I think with that, we've covered most of the questions. And if anything's missed out, we'll try to make it a point to get back to everyone on that. I think with that, I'd just like to say thank you very, very much, Lee. Thanks to everyone for joining, your interest, all your questions. I hope we've been able to share some information for you guys to venture out, try and recreate safely, try and camp, backpack. If you want to start by going on sort of guided trips, we have some guided trips on the Adventure Tripper website in the Olympics and the Mount Rainier National Park, but we also have some self-guided trips where we've done the research for you. We'll tell you which hikes and you can go do it yourself as well. But I guess this is all great information for anyone to get started on their own too. So thanks everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you, Preeti.
Bye, everyone. Hope everyone has a lovely evening and a great rest of their week. Bye now. Bye, Lee. Bye, guys.